The Cayman Islands, for example, which is perhaps the most pure tax haven in the world. Bahamas is probably the second best one in the Caribbean after the Cayman Islands. Like an obvious example in Europe would be Monaco, somewhere that I lived for many years. Has no income tax. It's never had an income tax. It's never inheritance tax, and never had capital gains taxes. Panama is a great offshore haven. It's not a tax haven in that if you earn money within Panama, it is taxed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but your offshore income is free of tax. It's a good place to set up an offshore company. And most of Central America as well. You have countries like Costa Rica, which don't tax foreign income. You've got Belize, and you've got Honduras. You've got other countries in that region. But the bottom line is that anywhere outside your home country can probably be made to work. Even countries that are high tax on the surface, like Spain. In Europe, you've also got Andorra, which is a little bit of a disappointment because it was a pure tax haven up until quite recently. I think 2015 thereabouts they changed it, and they introduced a tax of 10%, which again probably under pressure from the EU to do things like that. They don't like tax havens on their doorstep. And a lot of Spanish people, in particular, were choosing to move to Andorra. But it's not the easiest place to get to, but it's got some good banking. So if you want an offshore bank account, Andorra is a good choice. They've got 4 or 5 decent banks that you can choose from there. And there's no tax on overseas income, and again, pretty low tax on local income.
Welcome back to Ace Position. If any of our channel's 5 key verticals, stocks and shares, including commodities, acquisitions, including you yourself potentially taking part in hostile takeovers of public companies with us, profit maximization, asset protection, and tax minimization, sounds like everything you'd ever need in your finance journey, please don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and join our Discord chat room, linked in the description, so you can get in these plays and opportunities when we do. Where are some places then that are good for tax havens then? Obviously, we're not saying avoid tax at all costs, or I think we are actually, but
Well, I can only speak for myself. I'm saying for me, avoid tax at all costs. I will always find a way not to pay tax, and I don't care what anyone thinks of that.
Yeah,
people can say what they want, but I will always find a way to keep my money, and I think everybody else should do the same, because that's the best thing to do, to keep control of your own money. And there are many ways to do that. Obviously, tax havens play a part. They're very unpopular with the establishment, so talking about these kind of topics no doubt gets some people irritated, but if you don't agree with us, you don't have to watch.
Yeah.
But,
and just adding to that quickly is, the people who are disagreeing are the ones we're saying don't pay tax to, whereas we're saying give it back into the businesses that are stimulating the economy and actually growing things, which I think is a fair comment at the end of the
yes,
day.
I'm saying if you can keep money in your business, or you then get more money to expand your business, to employ more people, that helps grow the economy. It's a better result for everybody. If you're an investor, you get more money to invest. If you're not getting 40% stolen from you by the government every year, you've got more money to invest, which means that the investee companies end up with more resources. And again, they can invest more. They can invest in capital expenditure. They can invest in new employees, new locations, acquisitions, whatever. And there's more money in the economy. Money that the government takes out of the economy in the form of taxation is money that's wasted. No question about it. It's I don't understand why there's even an argument about that. But I realize that most people in the world that we have today disagree, and they like to be. They have a slave mindset. They like to pay their taxes like a good little slave. But that's not where we're coming from here. We're looking for ways to pay as little tax as possible, or preferably avoid it altogether. And tax havens. There are many of them. There are pure tax havens, which is countries that have no tax at all. Countries like an obvious example in Europe would be Monaco, somewhere that I lived for many years. It has no income tax. It's never had an income tax. It's never inheritance tax, and never had capital gains taxes. So that is a good choice, but it's very expensive. So a lot of what some people might save in tax is going to go on other expenses living in Monaco, because it's got the highest real estate prices in the world. So you're going to be spending a lot of money if you want to live there. So it's maybe not the best option for most people. It's also not a tax haven for companies. Strangely, have to pay tax on profits that they make outside of Monaco, and that is something that was enforced on them by the French government. But if your profits are inside Monaco, you're not taxed. So that is an interesting quirk of Monaco. So it's not a place to establish a company unless you're trading inside Monaco. Although another interesting point about Monaco is it has the most expensive companies in the world to set up a Monaco SAM, they're called. Is very expensive and needs all sorts of permissions, high share capital, and so on. So it's, again, not something that many people use unless they're actually trading within the Principality. So that is possibly the number one tax haven in Europe.
What about, say, Panama, Paraguay? Obviously, these places are good, but you would have to, sometimes you'd have to live there or visit at least, a week, a year, or whatever it might be, which is, still probably a nice holiday anyway.
Panama is a great offshore haven. It's not a tax haven in that if you earn money within Panama, it is taxed. So, but your offshore income is free of tax. It's a good place to set up an offshore company. And I would say it's not a bad place to live. I've spent time in Panama in the past. It's not a bad place to live. It's fairly easy to get a residence permit there. And it could certainly, if you had it as your tax base, and spent a few months every year there, it's certainly not a hardship to do that. It could even be recommended for some people. It's inexpensive. You can buy or rent a property there fairly cheaply. The cost of living is low. There's good banking services. It's got a lot of good things going for it, but it's not a traditional tax haven like Monaco. Paraguay is not as sophisticated as Panama. It's you're not going to want to bank in Paraguay. But it's a great place to get lost in South America if that is what you want to do. And it's, again, your income from outside the country is not taxed. So you could earn $10 million a year, live in Paraguay, as long as that $10 million is earned outside Paraguay, you get no tax to pay. But you are taxed on anything you earn in Paraguay, which I don't think would be a problem for anyone listening to this. Perhaps one of the easiest places in the world to get a residence permit. So definitely worth a look. And it's amazing just how easy it is for most people in most countries, with the exception of the United States, to opt out of the tax system. It's just as easy as leaving and setting up a residence in one of these countries that don't tax foreign income. If you're a US citizen, it's a bit more difficult because you're taxed on the basis of your citizenship. But there are still benefits for US citizens to live outside America. They've got an exclusion amount, and there's all sorts of different ways to shelter their income from tax too. So
should US citizens consider renouncing their citizenship because they basically tracked wherever they go?
I think only in exceptional circumstances should you do that, because my philosophy on that is you want to be the most free possible. And renouncing your US citizenship takes one major country out of circulation for you. So there might be times, for example, during the pandemic, Florida wasn't a bad place to be. It didn't have all the restrictions that other countries had. So I don't think I'd rush to renounce a US citizenship, and unless there was a very specific reason for doing it. Like if you have a US citizenship, you've also got a European passport, and you know that you're coming into a lot of money in the next couple of years. You're going to make $100 million in the next couple of years. Then if that's guaranteed, you should definitely renounce. But for most people, I'd think about it very carefully. I know there are a lot of people on the internet promoting the idea of renouncing US citizenship, but I wouldn't necessarily rush to do that. It's something that requires a lot of careful thought. And there's also an exit tax for US citizens. You've got to pay a percentage of your net worth. And there was, interestingly, there was a case very recently where there's a Russian guy who, I don't remember his name, but he sold his business for hundreds of millions of dollars. He renounced his US citizenship, I think just before he sold his business. And in his declaration of assets, he said he was only worth 300,000, but he was actually worth hundreds of millions. But it was held in offshore companies and so on, so it was debatable. But he then moved to his place in London. The US government had him arrested in London. They tried to extradite him to the US because they said he'd criminally avoided taxes. And eventually he had to settle with them, and he had to pay them, I think, almost every penny that he got from selling his business.
That's ridiculous.
Which was not the...
That's his business that he spent years and years making, and he sold it, and not a single penny's gone to him.
It's a perfect example of government extortion.
Yeah. I'll make sure to find that.
And if you can find the story and maybe post a link to the story in the notes. But it's outrageous, but it just shows what these big country governments can do for people that aggressively try to avoid tax. So the key is to, if you're going to come into a lot of money and you want to move your principal tax residence to a tax haven, do it sooner rather than later. Don't wait until after the money's come in. Do it preferably years in advance. But there's no anyone that's mobile has got no reason to be sitting in a country like the UK, which is becoming more socialist by the day, or Canada for that matter too. There's not a lot of reason to be there when there are plenty of other options for nicer places, lower taxes, better weather. It's amazing that so many people choose to stay. Quite frankly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm considering being, a digital nomad and just working from my laptop in a number of different places. But still working most of the day. But being in nice sunny places, maybe in winter and things like that. We'll definitely mention some more tax savers here. But I mean, even if you're someone who wants to pay a little bit of tax and contribute, I'm religious. I'm a Christian. I pay tax to places like Georgia. So Georgia's 15% instead of 25% corporation tax, and I think income tax is 20 as opposed to 40. Again,
Georgia is one of the few countries in Europe where they don't tax your foreign income.
Even in Georgia, the you're only taxed on the profit as well. So you might not actually have much profit, or the money sitting there, and it's not necessarily profit. But like I said,
you're only taxed when you take money out of the company and dividends, as I remember correctly, in Georgia. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's one advantage of Georgia. It's also a very easy place to move to. It's not for everybody. It's in Eastern Europe. It's a country that was set up with very after the fall of the Soviet Union, it developed very libertarian ideas. I'm not sure how well they're holding up now, but they only, last time I looked at it, which was a couple of years ago, they only had, I think, 4 different taxes, and it was very easy to deal with. And so I think Georgia a very interesting choice, and it's certainly somewhere it's easy to set up a company, easy to move there. There's no tax on foreign incomes.
But yeah, it's a Christian country, so I'd rather pay a Christian country there rather than the socialist UK government here. So they're just encouraging people to set up businesses, and especially if you're a digital business owner, just set it up in a country you want to pay tax in, or like you say, proper tax havens.
The Cayman Islands, for example, which is perhaps the most pure tax haven in the world, that has got no taxes at all. In essence, it doesn't. Well, I say the Cayman Islands, arguably the most pure tax haven in the world. It doesn't even have property tax, which is something most countries have. Monaco doesn't have property tax in any major way either. There's a small tax on the annual rent, but it doesn't have property taxes. But Cayman Islands has no property taxes, no income taxes, no capital gains tax, no inheritance tax. It funds everything out of duties on goods coming into the country. Perhaps the purest tax haven in the world, but very expensive to live there, very expensive to buy a house there. But it's a nice place. If you got a couple of $1 million, it's easy to move there. So it's definitely one that would be on the list. Might not be interesting enough for some people. It's island life, but it's a good place to form a company. They've got good banks. If you're in the US or Canada, it's in your time zone, English speaking country. It's a good place to open a bank in. The other big one that people from Europe in particular go to is the UAE, Dubai in particular. That's an amazing place. I don't know if you've been to Dubai. Have you?
No, I haven't.
It's definitely worth going to. It's amazing how in 40 years this huge city has just sprung out of the desert. It's great to look at pictures of what it was like in 1980 compared to today. It's unbelievable. They've got the world's highest buildings. They've got all these mega shopping malls. They've built all this infrastructure. It's unbelievable.
I have a lot of friends who've gone there, especially women, bizarrely. So it's just a question of whether you are happy with the way of life there, if that makes sense, because there is a bit of, being an Islamic sort of state country. You have to bear in mind that there's some surveillance, the internet, and things like that. But
there are some social restrictions. But as long as you don't want to do things like have sex on the beach or whatever, I don't think they're going to affect you. I certainly didn't.
And you can drink some alcohol as well. I believe they have some rooftop bars and stuff that
There's no restrictions on alcohol in Dubai. There are in some of the Emirates and the UAE, but not in Dubai. But I never felt any restrictions. Never felt any problems there. It's generally a nice place. It's probably not somewhere that I personally would choose to live, but I can see why people like it. It's got 0% tax. Unfortunately, they just introduced a corporation tax, which I guess
low though. I think it's 5%, is it, or something? Really?
9%. But 9%. I'm guessing that they were under some kind of international pressure to do that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the ads from e-com owners and business owners on Instagram and YouTube, they're always they've got the backdrop of Dubai almost every single time. So that tells you enough as it is, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I can see why people like it. It's probably pretty good for networking nowadays because so many people are there. And there's still the income tax is still 0% personal tax, and you've got most of the countries in that region have got 0% tax because they never had taxes. I think Saudi Arabia is going to be one to watch in the future. They certainly seem to be changing a lot, and they're looking to build cities like Dubai to attract Westerners to go and live there in a zero tax environment. So that's definitely one to watch for the future. I don't think it's quite ready yet for people to start moving to, but it's certainly going to be in the next few years. There might be a place to look at investing because they're going to be building cities, and they've seen what has happened with Dubai and how successful it's been, and they're going to want to try and replicate that. But you've got other countries like Qatar, which again, very safe place, very rich country, very interesting to visit, 0% tax there, and you've got Oman as well. So all these countries never had a culture of taxation, of income tax, and so they're all pretty interesting. But Dubai and Abu Dhabi, to a lesser extent, are the most interesting places to be there. But and these are pretty much pure tax havens, whereas countries like Panama and Paraguay are not pure tax havens because if you're living there, you may find you've got to actually file a tax return, but it might be a zero return because all your incomes come from overseas. But
people tend to use them more as a citizenship, and then they have their businesses and stuff elsewhere.
Yes, I mean you can live in Panama or you can live in Paraguay and have your business. You can use a company from an offshore company, or you can use a US company or whatever, and you won't pay tax on money that you earn from that company. So that's the way that it's done. And nowadays you need to have a residence somewhere. Like decades ago, it was quite easy not to have a legal residency anywhere and just live in different countries all through the year. But nowadays, your home tax authority is going to track you a little bit more.
Yeah.
You're going to have to say, look, I'm now a resident in Panama, and you might only spend 3 months a year there, and then spend the rest of the year in other countries. You could be spending time if you're not a US citizen, for example, you could be spending 3 or 4 months in the US, you could spend a couple of months in Panama, you could be spending some time down in Argentina, you could be spending the summer in Spain or the south of France, and you could live a pretty interesting life tax-free, and with the best weather and take the best of every country. Yeah,
and I mean, even the UK are sort of ditching this, or especially with what's going on here. I think that you used to be able to do 90 days, was it? And now they're getting rid of that as well. Or was it 180 days? I can't really remember. This is, I know some people.
It depends. They've got the HMRC have got a test, and it depends on your ties to the country. So in some cases, it's as little as 28 or 30 days. In some cases, if you have no ties to the country, you could spend 90 days in the UK. But they're changing the non-dom, which is a really dumb thing to do, because the non-dom they had for centuries, and that basically meant that for non-British people. It was the UK. The UK was a tax haven for non-British people because they didn't have to pay tax on their overseas income. It didn't apply to UK nationals, but for everybody else, it was a tax haven, and that's why London always had more billionaires than anywhere else in Europe. But the government, for political reasons, are changing it, which is crazy because these people were people that were investing in the country. They were buying things. They were going to the best restaurants. Most of them are probably going to leave over the next few years, and most of Central America as well. You have countries like Costa Rica, which don't tax foreign income. You've got Belize, and you've got Honduras. You've got other countries in that region, but the bottom line is that anywhere outside your home country can probably be made to work. Even countries that are high tax on the surface, like Spain. I've got a scheme. They call it the Beckham law because David Beckham used it when he went to play for Real Madrid. It basically means for the first 6 years that you're living in Spain, you can protect your overseas income from being taxed in Spain. I personally wouldn't trust the Spanish tax authorities because they brought a lot of high-profile prosecutions against high-profile foreigners that have been living there. Like who's the Colombian singer? Very famous. Shakira, was it? Yeah, I think the prosecutor's her.
That was.
You can fact check that one, make sure that's correct. But she had to pay millions of dollars to avoid being sent to prison in Spain.
Yeah,
Bahamas is probably the second best one in the Caribbean after the Cayman Islands. That is definitely a haven for wealthy people to live, and you can live there tax free. Again, very easy to move there. So that's another one that's probably easier to move to the Bahamas than it is to the Cayman Islands. Because last time I looked at it, you just had to pay a government fee of like $1,000 or $2,000 per year to get a short-term residence permit, and you can go and live there. So that's a nice one, and they've got some very nice communities there. So yeah, these are the Caribbean islands that I would look at if I was looking for a pure tax haven. But it depends. You've got in Europe, you've also got Andorra, which is a little bit of a disappointment because it was a pure tax haven up until quite recently. I think 2015 thereabouts they changed it, and they introduced a tax of 10%, which again probably under pressure from the EU to do things like that. They don't like tax havens on their doorstep, and a lot of Spanish people in particular were choosing to move to Andorra. But it's not the easiest place to get to, but it's got some good banking. So if you want an offshore bank account, Andorra is a good choice. They've got 4 or 5 decent banks that you can choose from there. And there's no tax on overseas income, and again, pretty low tax on local income. So it's one that's worth considering. It's a quieter type of life than somewhere like Monaco. So it depends what you're looking for. But I think anyone that's prepared to move physically to avoid tax can legally pay zero tax without problems. The people that run into problems are the people that try to avoid tax while still living in high tax countries like the UK or the US, although there are ways to do that, which we're not going to get into on this video.
How would you respond to someone who says that how are the government going to be able to fund the way of life for people?
Well, my response to that is the government shouldn't be funding the way of life for people. The government shouldn't be building the roads. In a capitalist society, the government shouldn't do anything apart from provide defense of the country and provide security to make sure that people aren't being stolen from or defrauded. So that's the only things, in my mind, the government should be doing. And the government should be cut by 90%. So there's no place for a government to be building roads or providing healthcare or providing education or these kind of things. These should all be private. And if there were no or very minimal taxes, people would have a lot more money to pay for these things. And anyone who is poor or disabled who can't pay for it would have more than adequate support from people that had the resources to help them. It's inconceivable that a supermarket's going to build a big supermarket somewhere and there's not going to be roads. They're not going to build roads to get to the nearest houses and so on. That's very easy to. People don't seem to be able to get their head around the fact that society can figure these things out. And there'd be road pricing. There'd be you'd pay to drive. But I think these are issues that would be very easily resolved by human cooperation. You don't need a group of gangsters calling themselves the government to
Yeah,
build
it's a
roads.
good point. It's a good point because, when you look at all the taxes, they are out of control, and it's like, you're only getting 20p on the pound or 20 cents on the dollar when you look at actually all of the taxes. Whereas, yes, people will be paying for the services, and the person who builds a supermarket might have to build the road as well. But I think it's a very good point you make, that it means that you're actually getting what you paid for. The money's going to something rather than just going into a void, and it's going to be going, like Starmer sending it to other countries to help with their migration problem rather than their own. So yeah, I think you've made a good point there as
Yes,
well.
it's very easy for politicians and bureaucrats to spend money that they didn't earn. In my book, people should be spending their own money. People should be spending money that they earn. They spend it much more carefully than they will if you're spending money that you didn't earn, money that comes from other people. So that
Yeah.
should not be something that happens in any rational society.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I expect any of this to change anytime soon, but it's nice to dream.
Yeah, and linking to Saudi Arabia, obviously they're building all these incredible projects and advertising them massively. Recently, I think it was 2022, 2021, they were showing the Line, this huge place which people they plan on trying to get everyone to live. But yeah, I mean, fascinating stuff there. And then they're compensating, players as well. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think they're trying to build these mega cities, and as I said, compete with Dubai to get wealthy foreigners to go and live there, which is a good strategy on their part. They want to move away from their reliance on oil, and they've been trying to increase their profile recently. They've been paying fortunes to hundreds of millions of dollars per year to high-profile football players like Cristiano Ronaldo moved there to play football for some incredible amount, which can't possibly make commercial sense for the
Mm-hmm.
football club to pay Ronaldo $250 million a
Yeah.
year, whatever they're paying him. They're doing that to increase the profile of the country and looking at attracting wealthy foreigners to go there in the future. And I've heard a lot of people saying recently they're interested in investing in Saudi Arabia. So I think it's one to watch. It's one to look at. I've never visited Saudi Arabia. I'd like to go and see it. It's interesting to see what they're doing, and it might well be that they're going to create the next Dubai. It might be the opportunity in building these new cities to get in at the bottom and buy apartments or whatever in some of these new cities. And it's a place again they've never had taxis there, so it's somewhere that could become a place to live in the future. It's
So we're advising people of the havens, but we're also advising people of keep a watch on these places because things are always changing.
There are places to watch that are up and coming that you can, even places like Panama that we spoke about earlier, you can still buy fairly inexpensive real estate there, and it's not for everybody, but it's I happen to like Panama City, and it's a modern developed city with everything you need. So yeah, and I think something like Saudi Arabia, it's probably not ready for prime time yet, but when they're building these cities, that's when the opportunities exist to go and make your investment, get in there. It's a country that is probably going to develop quickly, but as I said, it's probably not as much fun as Dubai for now. Dubai, I've got fewer restrictions. I think I'm correct in saying that Saudi Arabia, you still can't drink alcohol, for example.